vegetables for soup the other night. And I was hurrying.
Winslow Glade.
I was doing stupid. I was hurrying.
And took the end of your finger right off.
Up there.
Okay, you guys.
Stuff like that.
In
They
there
had
somewhere? Off Winslow Cross.
to use the blade stop. I've never had to use
We
it. But
put some money
it,
towards,
it would not stop.
new,
I'm like, Gary, get the blade stop.
little
Stop.
walkway, a couple of years away in there.
Did you save the piece?
Yeah, okay. That's the idea.
Yeah, we could have. Yeah, I should have saved it. Smushed it on.
It used to be on my house.
I know somebody who did that, and I'm like,
Are we all
why didn't you
ready?
save the piece?
Yeah. Oh, we're all ready.
Okay.
Last couple of years, I'm doing the walking I was doing.
Good.
All right, welcome everybody to the regularly stated meeting of the Yarmouth Conservation Commission. Today's Thursday, September 21st, 2023. This is to formally advise that as required by General Law, Chapter 38, Sections 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16, 2021, as extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, the Yarmouth Conservation Commission will hold a public meeting at the date and time noted above. The public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternative public access provided on the notice of meeting available on the Town of Yarmouth website. Our first order of business is an Eagle Scout project proposal for Sorella Conservation Area boardwalks.
Do you want to just take the mouse?
Then you- Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Matthew Ellis. I am a Boy Scout from Troop 50 Yarmouthport, and tonight I'm going to propose my plan for some work I'm going to do in Sturgill Conservation Land. My plan is to repair and extend some of the hiking bridges on the trail. I'll have the support of volunteers and scouts to assist with this project. There are a lot of muddy spots at the base of these bridges, and those areas, I'm going to extend those bridges to extend over those spots. The extensions will look just like the rest of the bridge, so it wouldn't be out of place. And we're also going to replace any damaged wood, any damage to the bridges that are there right now. My goal for this project is to have a dry and safe trail for people to walk on. Walking around the muddy spots could kill vegetation, cause potential erosion, and if it's walked around too much, the swamp that the bridge go over could expand and just won't be good. The Natural Resources Department has agreed to supply the majority of the supplies. Anything they don't supply, I'll have a sponsor to support me. My scouts and I will extend and repair the bridges that need it. They would be, like I said, they look exactly the same as the rest of the bridge, so they wouldn't be out of place. The planks on the top of the bridge and frames are made with 2x12s, and the posts that hold them on the ground are made by 6x6s. We're going to leave the trail better than we found it. Nothing of obstructions to be left behind. This project will make the trail more enjoyable for hikers, and I hope to help with the conservation of this land by protecting the vegetation and keeping the land intact. I have some pictures to show. So as you can see, this bridge is completely destroyed. Mud below it. It's just, I was going to extend it over that and put the boards back in place. As you can see, more damage to the boardwalk. That I was going to replace those damaged ones, and just mud in front of the, right in front of the boardwalk. So the boards would be going over that mud, so people wouldn't have to walk in mud, and people wouldn't walk around it and kill the plants and all the vegetation. And a lot of rotten. Oh. Come on. Oh, well. That was a picture of a rotten board. I was going to replace any of the rotten boards. As you can see, this picture, boards are split. All that would be replaced.
Hidden squirrel.
And yeah, that's
Oh, great.
pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
I walk that trail quite frequently, and thank you very much, because I hate putting on those boots just to take a walk to get out to the bogs. It's been muddy and a mess for a while. But I do have a question. When you extend, are you going to be putting in more 6x6s to bridge it, or are the planks going to go over it?
There might be a few ones that need it.
Okay.
Most of them won't, I don't think.
Okay,
But there's one I'm thinking of right now that would need more 6x6s.
that's what
But-
I'm very familiar with that trail, and I appreciate the work that you're doing on this, because now I'll get to do it when it rains.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you very much for taking this on, and good luck with it.
I want to say, I love those trails, and thank you so much, too. It needs some work, and it's just lovely down there. Thank you.
That was my plan for a while, do as an Eagle project, and I'm glad I get to do it in this trail. Any other questions?
It's great.
Again, thank you very much for doing it, because it's definitely needed, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, when you're finished, let us know how many bridges you worked on, just to get an idea of how many you repaired, and we'd love to see the results when you're done. We'll,
Thank you very much.
If you would like to come back and show us a couple pictures of the finished work, and we'd certainly like to do that. We'd like
I'll
to
be
see.
back. Thank you very much.
And I'll certainly enjoy walking them now, much more so.
And are you planning to do it this fall? Is that, you still
Yeah,
think
very
the idea
soon,
of the-
very
Okay,
soon.
very good.
As
Okay,
soon as I can.
okay, great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you
Good
very
luck.
much.
Well done.
Thank you.
Just show me where that
All
is.
right, our next order of business is a request for determination about applicability. Bruce Powers, 12 Barnes Lane, proposed addition and land subject to coastal storm flowage.
New and down, so I don't know those two.
So take a seat and get yourself organized, and then if you would, just state your name for the record, and then briefly tell us what you'd like to try and do.
Yeah, sure.
My name is Bruce Powers, 12 Barnes Lane.
I'm Ellen Powers, 12 Barnes Lane.
And what we're trying to do is do an addition. Right now, if you look at the plans on the left side, looking at the house, there's a two-stall garage and a deck above there. And our plan is to build a living room, sunroom. In the south side is a front porch. You can see that delineated with the lines. So that's in above there. It will be a story and a half and 2 bedrooms on the second floor. So there's an existing ranch-style house, and we're using the foundation, the existing foundation, and then on the back, the north side, there's going to be a wall that's 8 feet off the back of the existing foundation, and then sonotubes, Bigfoot, not sure what you call it, the Bigfoot, and then the sonotubes that supports the house. So our idea is to expand our house, and we're both retired, and our plan is to come and relocate to West Yarmouth.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Other questions from the board?
No.
Brittany, anything?
no questions.
Anybody in the audience on this one? Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to have any comments, questions? I see none. Unless there's further discussion among the board, would somebody like to make a motion for a -2?
So moved? Well,
Second,
Thank you.
Who moved it?
Ellie.
I did.
Rick was second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. So a negative is actually a good thing for you. It means that you don't have to do any further filings with the Conservation Commission. You can go ahead and start working toward anything else. I think just go for your building permit and move on from there, okay?
Thank you.
In a couple days, just sometime middle of next week, check with Brittany, and she'll issue the determination for you,
Certainly will.
okay?
Thank you all.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tom Durkin, I'm gonna say, just good luck.
All right, next order of business, continued notice of intent, SE 83-2398, Mark Burgess Shorefront Consulting for Paula Perone Trust, 12 Pleasant Street, proposed fill to raise the grade in the riverfront area, land subject to coastal storm flowage, and the buffer zone to a coastal bank.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, picture.
Yeah.
Are these new that you haven't sent us? Are these new?
You know, that used to be the roadway.
Used to what?
Okay.
That used to be the roadway.
I didn't know that.
It would go down Union Street and then go
Okay,
along
when you
the road.
email me, can you just let me know what dates they are taken?
I
Thanks.
didn't know that.
When they were taken, when you email me?
That's why it's so
Okay,
low.
that's fine.
And then it
It's
went
so
with those
hard.
houses.
It's so light, and not full
Do you have any plans for this?
of water to go through.
What?
Do we have any plans for this?
Well, it was the original plan. First of all, so I'm Mark Burgess with Shorefront Consulting, representing Ms. Peroni. She is stuck on the other side of the Bourne Bridge and can't get here in time or zoom in. And just as an aside, my Eagle Scout project was in constructing and installing wood duck houses in my hometown of Medfield, but that was before conservation.
Him as an Eagle Scout.
Anyway, so when we left the meeting last time, the option that the commission had given to me to pass on to the applicant was no fill and plants. Now, just for the record, what the project proposes in some fashion to help diminish the flood. You're never going to flood-proof this property, but the goal is to diminish it in a way that works for everybody, for the resource area, for the riverfront area, and obviously for the applicant. I proposed the no fill and plants, and the applicant basically just said that, well, that doesn't really help the situation at all, at least for flood proofing. So we went back, and I went out there Tuesday and met with her, and we looked at some options. I actually consulted with another consultant, colleague of mine. And so the purpose of tonight basically is like previous hearings, just discuss a few more options and see which way is amenable, and then I'll revise the plan, and we'll be done on October 5th. So the reason for the project, and the first picture that I gave you here was a picture she has from around the 70s. You can probably tell by the vehicle in the left-hand corner. And you can see, it's a nice lawn. I never saw that walkway, but it's a nice lawn, and obviously sea level was a lot lower back then. The second picture that's green, that was taken Monday or Tuesday. Now granted, it was raining at the time, but you can see this bare area, and that's what she wants to fix, because nothing's growing there. And from the weather we've had this summer, that everything, because of all the rain we had, at least in my yard, everything is growing, including invasives. And with all of that rain, this is still struggling. So it's from the more frequent saltwater inundation, not from high tide, but almost any other tide comes over the wall. So what can we do? I have three options that we can propose, and if we need to modify those in some fashion, we're open for discussion. The biggest thing is to raise the wall. Now, it's a cantilevered wall, so there's no anchors. So I literally could go in there, well, not me, but a contractor could go in there, pull off the cap, and pull the sheet out. We would have to come up about 8 inches only to match the adjacent wall to the south. So we would just pull the sheeting out of the ground 8 inches, and the calculations would support that. There's enough extra in the wall to be able to do that. So you'd pull it up, attach the cap. Okay, now you've got a higher wall. That solves the problem as far as water coming over the wall less frequently, but then it doesn't solve the problem as what happens when the water goes over the wall. So in conjunction with that, I probably would suggest to increase the gravel buffer that's there. The gravel buffer, it looks like it's 3 feet. I think on the original plan it was 4 or 5, but some weeds have grown into it. But I would expand that to allow infiltration behind the wall. And the reason why there's no plants there was because when this was permitted, the commission agreed at the time that planting like regular plants on a vegetative buffer wouldn't work because they won't survive the salt water. So they allowed to have the gravel buffer instead of a vegetative buffer. So the first option would be to raise the wall 8 inches and put the fill behind it to raise it up, and then replant the area with a native seed mix. What we didn't discuss and what we're offering is that obviously there has to be some kind of vegetative buffer to mitigate this and help the riverfront area, help with recharge, help with, uptake, things like that. So the one thing I want to discuss is how much of a vegetative buffer you would want. And I would suggest that we can put, let's say you want a 10-foot strip, 10-foot wide. That's more than we normally do, but not out of the ordinary. So let's just say you want a 10-foot wide strip. We can start there. What I'd propose is to put 5 feet of it at the base of the wall, the base of the wall up, up against the stone wall, so it's in the highest elevation possible. But those are going to have to be a mix of the plants that Brittany suggested at the last hearing. And then put another 5-foot buffer on top of the wall. So think of the advantage of that, where you have a lawn going right to the edge of the stone wall. So we put a vegetative buffer up there. We can put different plants, I'm in my opinion, better plants, that can do what they're supposed to do. So you'd have 2 vegetative buffers, and then that upper buffer is going to help, take care of any runoff from the lawn. So what we're talking about is a combination of raising the wall, and if there's no fill, then we would just raise the wall. If you're appeasable to fill, then to offset and mitigate any negative impacts of the riverfront area, then we would plant one or two vegetative buffers of whatever we decide. So raising the grade only doesn't seem to work for the commission. It's the simplest thing to do, but raising the wall will work as well. So with that, I'd like to open it up for discussion.
Comments from anybody?
That's a question. Yeah, you said, I'm just trying to take some notes here, but you said you had 3 new options. The first one was raise the wall and
Raise the wall with fill,
with fill.
raise the wall without fill,
Yeah,
and then fill only.
okay.
Like, the fill only was the original proposal. And we can still do that, but I'd still add vegetated buffers, which we didn't have in the application before.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're talking about the vegetated buffer. You said on the lower wall, which would be the seawall, and what, the other, is it toward the house?
Yeah, there's about a 4 or 5 foot stone wall.
Okay. I know.
We have the bulkhead, then we have all that flat land that floods, and then there's a stone wall. So I would suggest putting the first vegetative buffer at the base of that
Oh,
wall.
I see, that wall.
Yep. And then
Okay.
another one up top, behind it. So you get the lawn and a vegetative buffer, and then you get another vegetative buffer down below in an area where their plants are most likely to survive. I think that combination of that provides the benefits that you were looking for that admittedly we didn't offer the last time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. So in the second picture, the wall is raised already. If you raise it more, how is the water gonna, when we get a rain effect, if it doesn't wash over, how is it gonna leave that? It may just drown the area that's there if there's no fill in there.
Right, well, that's why.
Let's raise
that's
the
why
wall
you-
with fill.
Yeah, raising the wall and just raising the wall isn't to me the best outcome. You could increase the gravel buffer, but if the water level is at the level of the gravel, it's not gonna drain until the tide goes away. So, for me, my desired option would be to either leave the wall alone and just raise the grade with the 8x8 timber like we talked about, but provide the vegetative buffers. I think that's the most, in my opinion, be the most practical, because you're not going to stop the water from coming over the wall. That's just not going to happen. If the,
Still talking about fill, putting fill in there.
that would be my preference, but that's the reason for discussing these options with you. If the fill is a real problem, then she can just raise the wall, and we'll add a gravel buffer, and, more of a gravel buffer, and hopefully the water drains a little more quickly. Otherwise, without the fill, she has a swimming pool.
Now, just for historical purposes here, that used to be the roadway that went from the ferry over to where Packett's Landing is now. That used to be a roadway across those two properties.
Yeah, they found, when they were doing this wall, they found all kinds of stuff underground. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That's
Lee.
all I have.
Yeah, Lee from Lemco, I remember, he's been around
Been around.
a long time.
Chairman, I don't, it's not a solution. I mean, the applicant has admitted that overwash by tides is happening regularly. And the reality is with sea level rise, it's going to continue and increase and get worse and worse and worse. So we're going to be asked to add more fill just down the road. And, you know, even these interesting historic photographs, they didn't have a cap before, so the water would come on the grass, but it was able to escape right away. So I think we were exacerbating the problem by raising the sheathing, putting a cap on top of that, because there will be storms that broach that. There'll be salt water again. You know, it's just going to be an ongoing battle. And I don't know what the solution is, but I'm having a hard time agreeing to bringing any fill in, because I think it's just wrong.
Well, the problem will not be able to be solved once everything's at the same level as the neighbor's yard. Right now, the neighbor's yard, he's able to maintain a nice lawn because it's about 8 inches higher and it gradually goes up. So he doesn't get flooded, I'm not gonna say at all, and certainly
Frequently.
as frequently. That's all that she's trying to do. We know that's a losing battle, but that's all she's trying to do is kind of try to match next door, understanding the benefits that we need to be able to put that solution in place. But you're right, this would be it. There's nowhere to go from here. Yep.
Again, that's to maintain the lawn, but there's no effects of this flooding to the house that she's on because it's in higher property, right?
Right,
Number of feet.
right. I mean, this isn't a conservation issue, but no, she pays taxes for waterfront property, and that lower area is basically unusable. It's either muddy or it's flooded.
And
So
if it's flooded, it's waterfront.
I was going to say, I'd say it's still waterfront, right?
Yeah, 30 years from
Sorry.
now, yeah, 30 years from now, it'll be underwater most of the time. I know.
30 years from now, people who are not on the water will have waterfront property, but
Yeah, and this kind of a project is going to become more and more frequent as nature moves on.
Agreed.
So I think it's important to, well, you know, every site is different, but yes, this is the most that we can do. It's all we can do. And once it's done, it's done. And, you know, 30 years from now, it's the next home buyer's problem, probably.
I don't know, I have a problem with that much fill being thrown in there into the system, but that's
Right.
just my personal.
I have a question, please. Yeah, so I know we talked about this before, but, so is the fill seen as a way of protecting that piece of property? Or just making it look better, more aesthetically pleasing?
Making it usable
Usable for what?
for, even if you just want to go down there and hang out. I
To just
mean,
hang out, have a picnic or whatever, yeah, okay.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, she doesn't want the lawn that's next door.
Yeah,
Doesn't want that, but she'd like to have the same grade as that to reduce and increase when you can go down there and use it. It's, like I said, it's unusable, really.
yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right. So the objection to putting the fill in is that the fill's not gonna stay there? It's not gonna alleviate any of the
We can keep
flooding?
filling stuff up, but the property to the south of this, and this is just my take on this, the property to the south of this is higher.
Yeah, I've seen,
So the water goes on her property, so if she makes that higher, the water's gonna go on to Packet Landing.
oh,
So we're just sort of pushing it all the way down.
no. Packet
Where's
landing
going?
onto what, the parking lot or something? Oh, I see.
Well, water is level,
Just keep pushing it,
so the
the more you
packet.
fill, the more
I'm
it
sorry.
goes somewhere else.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I looked at the Packet Landing, and the wall, their parking lot, or the top of their wall, is almost identical to the south, to Austin's wall to the south. So she's like this. So raising it up would only match, I mean, if you want to say we raise it up only to match Packet Landing's elevation, but I think they're within an inch or so of, because I was there almost at high tide, and I'm looking over and I'm going, yeah, it's about the same distance. My point is that it's floodwater it's not gonna redirect it anywhere, it's just not gonna go there in the first place, unless and until, if her lawn's underwater, Packet Landing's underwater, and so is Austin to the south. So it doesn't change that. When you're in that extreme a situation, it's all the same.
And again, Ellie, this was a kind of a man-made area. It was used years and years ago as a roadway.
It was a road going through there, and there's two houses that it went through, and you can tell that the two houses are up higher,
Yeah.
and that's where the road was, and it just got
Road was in
absorbed.
front.
Right.
But in those days, did they
Landing.
bring in a whole bunch of fill to create that area so there was a road, do you know?
I don't know, I think they just dug up the road,
Okay.
Don't know. But yeah, it was a ferry landing, you said. Yep.
So also, just one other final, I guess, final comment. So this is a, maybe Rick can help with this, this is an unusual area along the river. There aren't other places kind of with the same problem, you don't think?
Well, it's probably the last piece of private property that has a sheathing bulkhead. You know, everything else is pretty much runs, well, I shouldn't say that. There is another example is up at Blue Rock Heights, but it's unusual after this, you know, so. But there have been sheathing bulkheads and stone bulkheads along the river for
Long time.
100 years, you know, more. It's not really unusual.
But, I mean, the looks of this is a little unique, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's flat, you
Yeah.
know, and usually there's a taper down to the water and.
Yeah. And that wouldn't work either, like taking out the bulkhead and let it just taper down to the water, I guess, huh?
Be worse. It would be worse.
Would be worse, okay. Well, that's
Would
good
get
to know.
sediment in the water, and that would be bad. Yeah.
I don't know.
My comments are the same as last time. You're in the riverfront area, we're governed by the DEP Wetlands Protection Act, and you don't demonstrate how this will provide an improvement over the existing conditions in the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act. So I don't see how any fill would benefit that, the interests of the act, and raising the wall, in my opinion, would be an entirely different filing that we didn't account for in this description of the narrative and all of that. So if you were to be proposing that, it would have to be a different filing, I think. And I don't understand what you're coming from in your usage of the term buffer, because a vegetated buffer has to be directly adjacent to the wetland resource area. Putting a planting area not adjacent would just be a planting area and not a vegetated buffer. I'm not saying there's no value in that, because there could be. It just would not be a vegetated buffer. And I think if we're in the riverfront area, we should look to be creating a vegetated buffer everywhere where there is none currently.
In the last hearing, you mentioned that there were two coastal banks here, because that's one of the revisions to the plan I have to make. And the first top of coastal bank was the vinyl seawall, but the second top of coastal bank was the top of the stone wall. So we would be putting a vegetated buffer adjacent to a,
Wetland resource area, not the most seaward wetland resource area.
but we're also proposing more plants down below, which is adjacent to the
Leaving
resource area.
a vast area of lawn in between the vegetated area and the river.
Well, the plants that you suggested, I have them in my notes, but the plants that you suggested, if we put them up next to the wall, I still want the gravel buffer there, because you've got to allow, somehow, we want that water to try to go down earlier than once the water goes down on the seaward side of the wall. But if we had a vegetated buffer directly adjacent to the gravel buffer, so now that's where you want it, we just have to be very careful to pick plants that can totally survive inundation. And Peyton's won't work because they don't get inundated enough. Peyton's need like a moontide or right at the edge of it's a little too
not a
high.
marsh,
It's a little too
but-
high above mean high water for Peyton's, but you would, let me see if I have it in my notes.
This is just why I think the commission is not regularly reviewing or discussing things, because we really need to see the plan showing some of this in order to make decisions on it. Like, I don't see how a gravel strip would infiltrate any more water than a vegetated strip. If you're putting gravel on top of the existing soil, You're just putting gravel on top of the area where the water would infiltrate into, whereas plants, the roots help the infiltration process, which gravel does not. So I really think we really need to see something new, unless if you're not going to do something new and you're still going to propose fill. The commission has shown they're not in support of fill in this area. That is all.
I agree, that's why we're here. If I want to get a direction to go from the commission, because it's a waste of time and money to revise a plan, and then that gets shot down. So I want to know what you guys want, and I'll do what you want.
Yeah, I think we already have.
We gave you the direction.
The direction was simply plants, that doesn't benefit the applicant at all.
So then they should go the sheeting
We're
route and
still offering
refile.
plants. We're still offering plants in different locations. If you need them up against the wall, then I'll make sure that we get specific varieties that can stand, being flooded. So with that, we're enhancing the area. You're providing more uptake. That's an enhancement to the riverfront area. If you can agree to that, then the only other thing we have to figure out is whether we do fill or well, like I said, just raising the wall to me isn't the best solution. She just wants to have the yard elevation-wise the same as next door. We're not stopping the earth from rotating on its axis, it's just.
We are limited by the Wetlands Protection Act, so,
And if we can provide enough of an enhancement to the riverfront area, which is what the plantings are for, and tell me how many plants you want.
but the fill
That's
would
all.
not be. So that's what we're saying.
What?
The fill would not be demonstrating an improvement to the interests.
The buffer mitigates that and provides a benefit to the riverfront area. That's,
I don't know, for that much fill, how many yards were you proposing? Over 600?
no, 160.
160, sorry, I mixed up my decimals. 160.
Yeah.
But that's still a lot.
Not much. Oh, look at how much that goes in beach nourishment projects. That's nothing.
Consider 150 cubic yards of anything to be a lot. I mean, personally, I don't like the idea of just bringing fill in and dumping it and then having a basically a Cape Cod lawn and a few plantings and some gravel strip as anything useful for anything as it relates to the act. If you're bringing that kind of fill in, I'd be saying, like, look, I want to see 35 feet
Oh,
of
yeah.
heavily vegetated area. I would be, that would be my very minimum standard if you were going to bring fill in. And I still don't think you could do it without raising the wall as well. And I agree that raising the wall would be, that's a totally separate filing. But I don't think you or your client are willing to plant the area that I would require to even begin to consider it.
She understands that when we did the project the first time, and when we were designing it, I stressed that you probably should match next door, and that wasn't there was a budget, and it just didn't happen. She realizes that was a mistake.
Did you bring was it you who brought the 10-foot gravel buffer the first time around?
No, I think it should be on the plan as existing. I think it's 4 or 5.
I don't, all I can say is
I'll let you know here.
I can't believe we signed on to that, but we did. That's you. It's neither here, it really doesn't matter.
I've got a dimension of 4 feet, so that would have been from the previous approval.
Well, that was you back in 2017, right? That's the one we were talking about, right?
Yeah, it says 4 feet.
Was it 4 feet of gravel, right?
Right.
Behind the wall.
This is as-built, so it does have
That's what's there
stone.
now. And if you want to add plants along there, as opposed to at the base of the wall, then I'll propose that to her, and if she's in agreement, then I'll revise the plan and we'll move forward. If it's 35 feet,
I'm just saying that's me.
yeah,
You've
Well, I'm
got
happy-
4 other people here who I'm not feeling the same love for Phil whatsoever. So before you go running off and saying this is the solution, I'm just saying, if I'm gonna even, and I'm not guaranteeing it, but I'm just saying, it's like, if I'm gonna look at it, I don't wanna see anything that's not gonna help, forward the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act and doing something to improve the riverfront.
That's fair, yeah.
So that would be I guess that would be, I don't like the idea of filling it, but like I said, I think you need to do both. I don't think you can do one or the other. I think you would have to end up doing both,
Both.
my opinion
Well-
only, though,
New filing.
which would be a new filing, yeah.
So you're saying both as in fill and raise the wall, but fill and leave the wall the way it is?
I'm saying me,
I understand.
me only.
I know.
Okay?
I'm seeking to understand. So what you're saying is that,
Saying I'm not gonna entertain the fill alone, even if you do plant it, even if you plant 50 foot, which is what I'd rather see. You can't just do that.
and
And I don't think you can just raise the wall.
I agree with you there, that's not the best solution.
So,
How come,
but at the same time, if you raise the wall and you bring plantings in, and I'm not so sure that you really need all that fill to begin with. I think you could do the planting on far less fill than what you're proposing,
Once you've raised the wall.
once you've raised the wall. I mean, doesn't that make sense? I don't know. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but that would seem to make sense to me, but.
Mark, I'd be inclined to ask for another filing to raise the sheathing wall as a solution to this.
and place the fill?
And plant.
And plants,
And
right,
plant,
and a bunch of plants.
Yep.
And the option of just filling and planting without raising the wall, why doesn't that work for you?
Because the water is just gonna keep running over it, and it's gonna just keep running, it'll just erode it away too quickly. It's just not worth it. I mean, in that area of the river,
Your photographs illustrate that very well.
Yeah.
that-
Yeah. As we said, this is not it's not a permanent solution. So what I'm coming away from this, and everybody else can chime in, is raise the wall to match the surrounding. And this is a new filing then, so if that's the case, I can't withdraw tonight because I want to see what she
Right.
wants to do, but, we'll figure that out. Raise the wall to match adjacent. We'll discuss 35 feet, but buffer strips and fill.
And attempt to do a little bit less fill.
less fill.
Yep.
Well, if you have 35 feet of plants, if I kept them at the elevation that the ground is now, right up against the bulkhead, and didn't start filling till after that, then that would decrease the amount somewhat.
I'd have to see what you're
Yeah.
talking about. And the other thing I would caution you, if you're gonna raise the wall, then you're also gonna have to make sure that it's engineered in such a manner that it's not gonna divert water onto either of the two
Packet Landing.
abutting properties.
Right, that's why it can't be any higher than either the Packet Landing parking lot, where that wall is, I don't have my laser pointer, but the L.
I'm just saying to keep that in mind. I mean,
Yes,
that's
right.
something you have to make sure that, because we can't approve something that's going to,
I know that.
and you need to design something that's not gonna allow for that water to get diverted over onto other properties.
I'll check the grades of the Packet Landing and the wall to the south, whichever one's lower, that's as high as we should go to match that. Then you're not changing the way the water's moving or flowing. So I know that's part of the regulations, certainly.
Okay.
Can I get a consensus from the rest of the board on the buffer strips?
Consensus about what?
Ed had suggested what worked for him was 35 feet.
Well, it sounds like he and Rick are presenting you with a solution.
Right, are you guys in agreement with 35 feet?
I would be in agreement with the solution, yes, I would.
Okay, thank you. Ellie? She's thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Okay.
I don't like the
Remember,
idea, but it's
this
less
is
than.
not, I mean,
We're not voting.
To see it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's-
and the amount of fill that's gonna be put in
You
there.
need to see it, so you
Yeah.
can't guarantee, so just understand, it's not a guarantee, not a guaranteed slam dunk.
I totally get that.
So.
But this
just, I
is
mean,
part of
make
the
sure they-
process for
make
me to
sure
get
she
a direction.
understands it, and, yeah, come back to us if you choose to withdraw, this one and come back with a new one, just make sure she understands that it's not a
Done deal.
guaranteed thing.
It's not a done
Yeah.
deal.
Right, I mean, there might be further adjustments that are necessary.
And I will also tell you right now that when I'm talking about heavily planted, I'm meaning heavily planted, okay? So I want to see lots of diversity and very nice dense patterns all the way through. So it emulates something that is going to be able to not only look nice, but it will also help divert some of that water.
Well, I might enlist the help of a planting company that's out of my wheelhouse.
I would suggest that would be a good idea.
Yeah, many times we see planting plans, that's what you're talking about. We want to see a plan that's detailed in terms of all that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And robust. That blue line you have on there, Brittany, is that 35 feet that you drew it out to?
Yes, very roughly.
What now?
This is the Mass GIS. I measured 35 feet, very roughly,
Oh,
and
okay.
it goes
You know, the other
about
thing I
7
find-
feet seaward of the stairs.
What I find interesting there is that you can see there's like a
Like a bowl.
line right between the left portion of the grass or ground, whatever's there. And the,
Here,
yeah. I mean, you'll notice that line comes very,
Yep, that's about where the water is.
where the
Yep.
water comes,
the
right?
flood,
Yep.
the
So
flood
she
area.
still has lawn there, and that's about where the 35 feet.
Yeah, the lowest spot is right where it's labeled 12 Pleasant Street. That's the lowest spot, that's the picture I showed you. And then, yeah, it does get a little higher. It's not exactly flat, but only by a couple of inches back to the wall. Now, the vegetated buffer, would you be okay if we split it? We put some down low and some up high, because it's still
No.
adjacent to,
No.
you want to see it all down low?
Yes.
Okay. That's good to know. Okay.
Again, less fill.
Yep. Considerably.
Little doubt about that, where you see the 35-foot line there.
Well, like I said, if the planting people can tell me that we plant 35 feet without raising that grade, that's gonna take a ton of fill away.
Right.
So that would, I'll let them make that decision, though. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I realize that this can be frustrating sometimes, but I appreciate the process that we're able to do this.
And I would just like to note that this should not be an ongoing thing.
See, this is something this is not, I mean, we're not gonna be arguing and having a discussion on this. It's like, this is very unusual for what we've done. It's one thing for you to come in and ask a couple questions before you file something. This is just unprecedented, that you come in, you're
No
told to do
plan.
something, you come back with nothing, and you say, let's talk about it some more. I mean, I don't like sitting here and having the board held at bay saying like, okay, well, now we have to think, well, what do we want to do? The job is you propose, we consider, and then we make the decision, and we change things as necessary. But I don't like this idea of starting a hearing and then saying, okay, now we're gonna have to switch everything over, and what do you think we should do for this? That's just not the way, and that's just my opinion, but
Well, I think
I
it's,
don't think
Yeah,
that's how we
moving-
should be doing
I
it.
agree. Moving forward, we shouldn't be doing this again.
But either way, so I need a continuance.
yep. I'm gonna be here October 5th, but
You don't think you'll be ready?
not, well, I only have two choices. If we do what you're suggesting, it needs a new filing, in which case I would withdraw this one.
Yeah, I think the only issue is that,
Filing whenever I get around to doing it. If she wants to go another route and propose something else, I
yeah,
can
our only
revise that.
choice at this point is either to vote yay, nay, or you ask for a continuance.
I'll
So
ask
we
for-
can, and then at that continuance, you would say, if you're gonna go with the whole new idea, that you would say,
Or you
we're just
can
withdrawing
beforehand,
without prejudice.
Right, so I'm going to be here October 5th anyway, so let's,
So October 5th?
yeah.
All right,
I'll-
so,
I'll know which direction we're going to head by then,
okay.
okay?
All right, do I have a motion to continue to October 5th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. See you on the 5th.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, next order of business is another continued notice of intent for SE 83-2397 Royal Gorowski WRS Engineering for Paul and Nancy Cruz, 52 Prince Road, proposed dock and boat lift in land under the ocean, coastal beach, salt marsh, land containing shellfish, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. We have a letter from the applicant's engineer on behalf of a client requesting a continuance from your September 21st, 2023 meeting to allow time to meet with Waterways. A new option has been considered, and we will be submitting new plans to both Conservation and Waterways. Respectfully request to be placed on the October 19th, 2023 agenda.
October 19th, is it?
October 19th.
How many,
Too many.
yes,
Too many.
so we've talked about limiting the number of,
We have.
we need to,
We're working on that. When we do the regulation
Yes.
update, we'll be putting that into the,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I will not be here on the 5th of October. 6th or 5th, whatever it is.
but okay, so this one, so do I have a motion to continue to October 19th?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, second. All those in favor?
Hopping.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Who seconded that?
I did.
We're writing on the same paper.
All right, we have two requests for certificate of compliance. The first one is SE 83-1319, 15 Highland Street. Brittany, you say it's okay. We just need to issue pending removal of landscaping debris that will be taken care of sometime soon, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So unless there's any further discussion, do I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for SE 83-1319, 15 Highland Street?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. The next certificate of compliance, request for certificate of compliance is for SE 83-1867, 12 and 16 Highland Street. That is all good to go. Do I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for SE 83-1867?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Okay, our next order of business is other business, and the first portion of that is the presentation of the Yarmouth Chapter 143 Wetlands Bylaw Update.
Great. For those of you, very few here, there's copies of the wetland bylaw available. For everyone else, there's copies on the website available. So we are proposing to update the Yarmouth General Bylaw, Chapter 143, Wetlands, at special town meeting this fall on November 7th. This is part of the public meeting process to get some feedback. The purpose of the bylaw update is to update this longstanding bylaw that we've had. It was originally proposed and last amended in 1987. It's been many years since then, and the language is a little dull, needs some updating, and there's some content as well that could use updating to come up to speed with recent science and data. It moves some provisions from the bylaw, from the regulations to the bylaw. It adds clarifying detail in line with two documents that it used as models, including the Massachusetts Association for Conservation Commission's model bylaw that was produced in 2021, and provisions from the Cape Cod Commission Model Coastal Resiliency article. It does add 3 jurisdictional areas, vernal pools, the riverfront area, which is echoed from the DEP wetlands regulations. We're just coming up to speed with our bylaw, and a brand new resource area called the Coastal Resiliency Zone. The first of those vernal pools, several towns on Cape have provisions in their regulations to protect vernal pools. They're very important and provide distinctive wildlife habitat for breeding for distinctive plants and animals, mostly amphibians, in Massachusetts. In the state law, they're only protected if they're part of a wetland resource area and certified by the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. In Yarmouth, we only have 6 certified vernal pools, which we certified this year, and they're all on town land. So under the state law, nothing would be protected in Yarmouth. Our proposed bylaw would add protection to all vernal pools under a presumption that they would supply that essential habitat function, whether they're certified or not. And it would include adjacent habitat shown to be important during those breeding processes for these amphibians. Next is the riverfront area. It was introduced in 1996 under the Rivers Protection Act, included in the state DEP regulations. It has jurisdiction to 200 feet, and there's no buffer zone to it. Only perennial streams and rivers have regulatable riverfront areas, and this will just create consistency with the state regulations and mostly just list it as an additional resource area protected under the bylaw. The most new one is the Coastal Resiliency Zone. Our current regulations, flood protection is listed as a protected interest and value, and land subject to coastal storm flowage is a protected resource area. However, there are no performance standards, and the current flood protections rely on historic FEMA maps which don't protect or consider against future risk. We all know we're in turbulent times. Climate change and sea level rise have a significant impact to all of our coastal lands, as we've seen earlier tonight with our proposals. DEP has promised to promulgate regulations starting in 2020 or earlier. They continue to present these at all conferences, and they were part of the State Hazard Mitigation and Climate Adaptation Plan in 2018. Their goal was to promulgate regulations and performance standards to be finished by 2023 for land subject to coastal storm flowage. A lot of what's being presented here has been presented in those straight from DEP, so we are using those as a model as well. We just want to come out with them a little bit sooner so that we can start protecting our coastal resiliency areas. So the main goal is to avoid, minimize, and mitigate the risk of environmental damage, loss of natural resources, human suffering, the loss of life, and property resulting from storms, flooding, erosion, continuing sea level rise by promoting greater resiliency within areas subject to coastal flooding currently and as sea levels rise. So to get down into this new resource area, the Coastal Resiliency Zone will include land subject to coastal storm flowage. It will include a slightly larger area of coastal flood risk defined by the best available coastal flooding model, which the town would define in our regulations, and the buffer zones of other resource areas. DEP defines land subject to as any land subject to inundation up to the 100-year storm, surge of record, or storm of record. So that's all using historical data, while the coastal flood risk area includes 1% annual storm based on the best available model, and the best available model for a target year. So we would be looking to 2050 to protect the town of Yarmouth's resource areas, considering the future. And we'd be using the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model for that year. I'll get into that a bit. The land subject to coastal storm flowage is also separated into some sub-areas. The velocity zone, which has wave heights of 3 feet and higher. The moderate wave action, which is between 1 and 3 feet of waves. And minimal wave action, which is less than 1.5 feet. There would be different regulation performance standards in each of these zones. The most strict, obviously, being in the velocity zone to prevent future development in this dangerous area and to limit redevelopment where necessary. Here's a map of the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model, target year 2050 for the 1% annual coastal flood risk. There's a hard copy here, and a large copy will be available in Town Hall for viewing. It's also been uploaded to the town's GIS, so you can input your data, your address, to see whether or not it would fall into this area. The gray zone is the FEMA land subject to coastal storm flowage currently. As I said previously, these data sets aren't equal. It's just a visual aid to show the change in jurisdiction while the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model uses future modeling, including sea level rise, and most importantly, wave action to predict future flood risk, while FEMA uses what we call the bathtub model, assuming that land would flood at equal elevations without considering any storm surge or wave action. So it can show areas that won't flood, that will, and areas that will flood, that won't. So the use of all the data available to us is what makes the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model more accurate and able to predict these storms for the future. Just to point out, the difference in jurisdictional area shown on the map here is 1.64 square miles. And the area most inland is where we're seeing that expansion in jurisdiction. These will have the most minimal performance standards. So the areas in the velocity zone are going to be where we're going to see the regulations more heavily impacting our development. The inlandmost areas where we are seeing that expansion in jurisdiction is not going to be impacted as much by the regulations. They will have some. We intend to include in those performance standards for the increased areas policies that prohibit dangerous channelization of floodwaters and ponding, and encourage maintenance of natural surfaces, pervious areas, and we will consider requiring replacement of trees as well. There are two sub-areas within the coastal resiliency zone, the special transition area and highly developed area, which we will define. The transition areas are located landward of coastal beaches, dunes, banks, and salt marshes. These can contain the predicted path of wetland migration, where the resource areas are predicted to migrate based on the sea level rise maps. This special area will have different performance standards than the rest of the coastal resiliency zone in hopes to protect those predicted paths of wetland migration. The highly developed areas within the coastal resiliency zone will include multi-site town centers, commercial areas, and other areas where building and impervious surfaces have replaced most natural surfaces. These can be highly important in towns, and while DEP recognizes that, we want to apply different performance standards in these areas to protect the interests while still allowing some form of redevelopment to maintain their purpose. So their performance standards will vary regarding redevelopment in the highly developed areas. That's all I have for an overview for the bylaw. We will be having another public meeting at the Board of Selectmen on October 17th prior to town meeting on November 7th. We're going to take questions, but I did receive several comments and feedback from our comment period. We sent the bylaw via email out to most, if not all, of our consultants that I've seen within the past year and a half. We've posted it on the conservation webpage for about a month, and it's gone on to the news portion of the website, as well as Channel 18 and social media. So I've gotten 3 comments back. I got a comment from Mark Burgess, who wanted some clarification about the bylaw statement, 2 portions about how the commission could, revoke a permit for good cause. He was concerned about good cause not having a definition. And I let him know that this didn't represent anything we were updating, that it has followed through with our regulations that we've had in the past. But I would follow up with town council to see if we could get a definition for that. And his other concern was regarding the commission being able to record a document for an applicant. This is also something that has been followed, that is remaining from our existing regulations. And it would be applicable in a scenario where an applicant has started work and not recorded the order of conditions while they're required to do so. So we would be able to get that recorded for them. He was happy with the responses I gave him for that. We also received comment from Dan Ojala, Down Cape Engineering. It was unclear to him that this was going to town meeting, and he thought that was very important. So I clarified that this indeed was going to town meeting and not just being voted in by the commission tonight, and that the maps are available in paper form and online, as well as the GIS interactive map, so people will be able to see where their property falls in this new proposed coastal resiliency zone. Those addressed his concerns, and he wanted to make sure that town voters can understand the extent of the changes which they're charged with voting for. So I had also added in a frequently asked questions about the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model to the webpage, because while I'm not an expert in it, it describes how it was created, what data it used, and how it can be helpful for modeling change. I also received lots of comments from Lynn Hamlin. I was going to read through them unless you'd.
Are you going to do it yourself? All right, so we'll just note that they're there, and then,
We have a list of comments and feedback along with responses from Lynn Hamlin, but she's here, so she'd like to discuss them. You could come up.
go ahead and do that right now.
That was the last one I had,
The
so.
last one, so.
I don't know if you got a copy of mine. I have paper copy. I'm old and I like paper.
I just emailed it to them today because we got it around.
Yeah, if you
Everybody's
have
got
it,
paper?
if you
take
have
'em.
it,
I do.
pass it down.
I just use the computer and then print everything. I hate when stores send me.
Exactly the same way.
We prefer
We're old, we
paper.
prefer paper.
I want paper.
I definitely do. Thank you.
On it.
Hamlin Consulting, I know them.
Thank you.
Doodle.
Oh, there's a lot of comments. here.
Outside? I don't know.
2 pages. For me, it's really succinct.
Is he
And
leaving? Sorry.
I feel your pain doing regulation and bylaw changes is painful and it's arduous and it takes a lot of dedication, a lot of time. So I admire that and respect you for doing it. My concerns were twofold. Mostly that I was concerned that the average voter isn't going to be familiar with the language or the references cited in the bylaw that will, I think, significantly expand your jurisdiction. And I think if, I didn't know what kind of presentation you were going to do on the town meeting floor. I assume you'll be showing the maps and.
Yeah, I was going to do a presentation similar to this one unless I got otherwise comment.
I just think that a lot of people, my experience in town meeting is the people that delve right into it and they'll ask you and call up and want the information. There's people that just assume things, and then when they are faced with having to deal with their assumptions, they wonder, how did this happen? So I was just happy to hear that there's going to be a similar presentation. The rest of my comments were clarification comments, and Brittany was nice enough in her busy day to send me back a very developed response, but I still had questions on your response. So I'm going to
Okay.
try to just, like I said, it's only 2 pages, so it's not a lot. You expand your, I call them interests, you're calling them values of the resource area to include rare species habitat, including rare plant and animal species. I know you know this is an increase. Typically, it's just animals, and it's animals that depend on wetlands for a portion of their lives. And now you've increased the jurisdiction to be plant and animal species, which instead of being estimated habitat will be priority habitat. And I didn't know how that was going to be applied. Brittany has informed me that that's specific. It'll be a specific value to vernal pools and vernal pool habitat. Just was confirming that was the intent.
That is the intention, yes. And we would continue, we do protect them whenever they occur in the buffer zone or the resource area as it is right now. It is one of the interests we currently protect, even if it's a plant or an animal. So if there's, especially in Horse Pond, there are priority habitats listed there for some endangered plants. And we have already had filings concerning those go straight to NHESP for review.
Okay. It makes my life easier because when I'm filling out the application, I know that they are subject to MISA through priority habitat, and I don't know who the local, there often isn't a local regulatory oversight. It's supposed to fall to the building commissioner, and they don't know natural heritage. So I don't really have a problem with it per se. I just didn't know how it was going to be applied. The second one that's added is greenhouse gas emission prevention and reduction, and I don't understand how that relates to wetlands interests, and I don't understand the performance standard that would go along with that. I don't know if you're looking to regulate how somebody heats their home, or like what kind of machinery they can use, can they have a barbecue? I wasn't sure how that interest related to wetlands protection or wetlands interest. Let me just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I can address each one so we don't get lost. I somewhat agree with you there. That was included in the MACC model bylaw. I think the intention was to list it as a value in hopes to diminish future climate change and encourage resiliency. I don't anticipate what performance standard would go along with that, so I would put to the commission that we could consider removing that.
Okay. The last one that I was concerned with is climate change, ecological and community adaptation and resilience. It is just so broad and all-encompassing, even in everyday discussions, politically, socially. I just was looking for it to be bordered or it's more specific, so it doesn't become like a catch-all, either to deny a project or to impose what might be considered excessive conditions. It just is such a broad, all-encompassing, could be anything these days. So I was just looking to see if in the regulations it was going to be made clear what that meant.
I don't think per se it would be defined in the regulations. It is an interest to the act, so there would be certain resource areas that would be it would be applicable to, and some that it would not. I anticipate all of the coastal resource areas would have that as an added interest. Not all of them would have a performance standard listed if it's not tangible to be able to protect it with a performance standard. I think Salt Marsh may have a tangible performance standard for sea level rise protecting the area directly adjacent based on our current sea level rise modeling. But we can define it in the regulations. I don't have it defined in there right now. But it would be on a resource area by resource area basis.
Okay. We kind of went through most of the coastal resiliency zone, the increase in jurisdiction. And the one question I had left over is the highly developed areas, do those have to overlap another resource area, or can there be upland highly developed areas?
It would have to be within the mapped coastal flood risk area. So it doesn't necessarily have to be within the land subject to coastal storm flowage, but it could be within that new area defined by the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model 2050. So it would have to be within that.
So I think that even though you make statements, and I believe you, I mean, I don't say you're misrepresenting anything, that the...
It's shown on the little diagram.
Right, but that the, where you increase the flood zone, or the future flood zone.
Yeah.
In the inland areas, and they'll have minimal requirements of an applicant. The fact that you're still going to make somebody now have to come before the Conservation Commission is a significant cost consideration for people or a design consideration for people. So I just would like people to know what's going on. And maybe everybody will think that's a great thing, but I just would think it's important for them to know what they're voting for.
Definitely, and we will have a draft of the regulations available for review prior to town meeting to make any of these unclear questions more clear. And it just goes back to the overarching goal of these. We're trying to prevent future losses. So in the flood zone, just trying to make everything safer for everybody and their own assets. And within that highly developed area, there's going to be more leniency than any other area because they're assumed to be very important to the town center. So that area is defined in order to give them relief from the general performance standards in the coastal resiliency zone.
I think that I know that you need to get the bylaw through, and then the regs can be approved in-house. But it would almost be useful, if people looking into it, that if you could even maybe attach the draft regulations. I think they're developed, right?
They're developed.
Or whatever's developed.
close to being
It might
developed.
just be help to clarify.
Yeah, they'll be posted as soon as possible.
So I just misread, and it would be better clarified, you are excluding a buffer zone to land subject to coastal storm flowage. So are you excluding a buffer zone to the whole coastal resiliency zone?
The coastal resiliency zone and land subject to do not have buffer zones. They are just their own resource
I
areas.
think my confusion was the way it's worded. You explained it to me. Land adjoining these resource areas, these resource areas, maybe that just should be resource
Listed
areas in
in-
A1.
Yeah, listed in,
Instead of these, because.
agree.
Okay, that's just tidying up. I was confused about the, under applications and fees, that it just says, just a blanket statement that you're not obligated to accept the things that you can file with the state, and maybe that needs elaboration. I just didn't understand what that meant.
This was one of the lawyer areas that I also don't completely understand. It was included in both the model articles, and our council had reviewed it and didn't have any concerns about it. I will bring it back up to him because I don't understand outside of the scenario I gave you, where if someone is trying to file with the state and trying to bypass our bylaw, we're not obligated to take their filing because they haven't filed under the town bylaw. Other than that, I don't understand where that would be applicable.
Yeah, that's not even really what it says. I don't even know what
Yeah.
it's saying. But I'm glad that you and I are both confused by it. Let's see. And then the affidavits is just a hangover from the original directions for notice of intents. Nobody does affidavit. I haven't done an affidavit
Yeah.
in decades.
I would agree to removing that as well.
We just have to submit the receipts, and that's the proof, instead of me saying that I did it. Let's see. And the next one, you did clarify, I understand that, about RDAs. And then I learned something today. I did not know that already in your regulation, you can continue a hearing without the applicant's consent. I did not know that. It's never come up.
So the way that it's worded, it's not really without the applicant's consent. It's if, like, we have a discussion and there's further information needed, we can continue the hearing. So we wouldn't be making a vote on it
If we need more information.
if we need more information. So the commission therefore would be continuing it instead of the client.
But right in the regs, I found it. It says without the applicant's consent, specifically.
Yes, because if they don't want to provide the information, we still require it. So we can give them an opportunity and continue it or vote on it. So that would be giving them a chance.
So it's stated in the
Same
regulation,
place.
but what we're asking is like, well, we would need to continue it if we need to get additional information that you as the applicant would supply. And if they don't want to supply it,
You can still force a vote.
then,
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, they could-
It's no
we're not
different.
forcing it. It's them by not giving or deciding not to give the information, that added information that we were requiring. They're saying, okay, well, vote,
Okay.
vote then.
It's the
So,
same thing, just, okay,
Yeah.
it's the same thing, just a little more words.
Yeah.
Again, affidavits are redundant. Under 143.7, permits and conditions, there's that big paragraph that you can take into account everything, anywhere. And I don't quite understand, I was looking for clarification. It seems that, to me, it's saying that you can deny or condition a project, like a project on one side of town, to make up for degradation on another side of town, or there is no nexus between the projects. It just says you can consider anything everywhere in town when making a decision on a project. So that confused
So did my
me.
response still not clarify that
not really.
Okay, I'm just going to read it out loud and then I will say my response, and if it still doesn't make sense, I will ask the commission. So in section 143, the commission shall also take into account any loss, degradation, isolation, and replacement or replication of such protected resource areas elsewhere in the community and the watershed, resulting from past activities, whether permitted, unpermitted, exempt, and foreseeable future activities. So that, to me, means the commission can take into account information of loss, degradation, and isolation of a protected resource area anywhere else in the community resulting from other activities similar to the proposed. So if someone's, and use that information to help them make a decision, is what that means to me. If the commission can take into account all of the information that's going on around the town, that can be a valuable resource to them, especially if it's something that has caused loss of a resource area somewhere else.
So in simple terms, it's like a comp,
Yeah, it's like using an example of something.
real estate. You know, it's a comparable project that you can use as a reference point. That's my take on it.
That is what it means to me.
We do that already, I mean, don't we essentially say, it's like, look, we've had this experience before.
Right, and how,
at
this is a
some
remedy
other
that
place.
we've put in place that has
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah, that is what that says to me. If other people have other insight on that, I don't think it's saying what you,
But I thought it was saying, or
I
how
don't, I don't at all.
The trouble with these things is I'm talking to 5 people, and then I'm not going to be around doing this for another 10 years, but I don't want to. But then you have all new people, and then that's such a, to me, it's subject to interpretation. That's initially how I read it, but I understand how you're explaining it as well.
Okay, I think it makes
debate it.
sense.
Do too.
Okay.
At first, I was kind of confused, and I put it in the context that I was described to you. And I think it's easily transferable from case to case at that point.
Okay.
And I'm talking as a past chair, I think how I would present this, so I feel pretty confident that it works.
Okay. And then I think this just could be placing problems. So in section C of the 143.7, it goes on about waivers. It's section B, I'm sorry. Goes on about waivers and what you do with a waiver and what's reasonable for a waiver. And then the last sentence, waiver of this bylaw is not permitted. So either, and Brittany said that you can't waive the whole bylaw, but you can waive a section that this either is in the wrong place or it needs elaborating. That's 143.7B, the last sentence. It just is it's stuck on there and it shouldn't be stuck on there.
43,
I mean,
See,
B.
I'm sorry, it's
It's
B.
B.
I made a mistake in my citation, it was B.
So I think in that area, it would be best to separate out and start that large paragraph with another C, starting with the commission may waive specifically identified and requested procedures, design specs, performance, blah, blah, blah. And the end of that sentence is waiver of this bylaw is not permitted. Or we can include waiver of this entire bylaw is not
Something,
permitted.
it's just right, the way it is, I stopped short, what are they? We're just talking about all the waiver, and now I can't waiver, so I understand your explanation, it just isn't clear, and this how it's,
Do you think calling out that as its own section? I mean, I think we need to include that the commission may specifically waive blah, blah, blah.
well, you do.
You can't just waive the bylaw itself. You can waive
Parts of it.
performance standards.
Yeah, so wouldn't you just say waiver of this bylaw itself is not?
It should be in a second, separate, I believe, I agree with Brittany, it's attached to a whole discussion on waivers.
I
and
might have
then
just
you-
missed that formatting.
Yeah, I think it's right, I think it just needs to be, maybe throw the word entire in and give it its own number.
Okay.
Better.
I'm
really
perfectly
B.
fine doing that. I'll let you know, many eyes have been on this.
I
Did not catch
have
that.
nightmares thinking of doing this. I've done this before, it's awful. Both on the doing your end and the reviewing end, it's awful. And I'm very pleased that I had, to me, a really limited number of comments, which speaks to your efforts. The other, I have two more things. You encompass redevelopment, you encompass riverfront area, and the riverfront in the bylaw. But you talk extensively that everything needs to have an alternatives analysis. There's a section in the riverfront in the state regs that allow for redevelopment. That's pretty much what I use exclusively when forwarding a project, because I can remember once maybe going on a vacant lot in a riverfront and
Yeah.
having to do an alternatives analysis, but the redevelopment, you do not do alternatives analysis. You apply the standards in that section of the regulation. So it's just the way it was worded, it seemed like everything had to have an alternatives analysis. Maybe you could just say, except for when redevelopment or this, I think it's just housekeeping. Unless you totally disagree with me, then it's not housekeeping.
I'm just going to read through that bit. Even in redevelopment scenarios, even if it's not outlined in a specific alternatives analysis, there should be some evidence to show that nothing else can be proposed with less adverse effects.
Well, the
'Cause you're-
redevelopment regs are laid out very specifically. Thou shalt be no closer, thou shalt expand further from the river. If you can't do A, B, and C, you have to do restoration. They're very deliberate
Yeah.
in formula.
I don't think this intends to divert in any way from the DEP regulations. If it comes off that way, we should revise it.
I thought it did, but again, it's just something that was a concern to me, if you can, just,
So no-
but you can look at it later, you don't.
Yeah, I might get back to you on that because I agree with you that it does say it does not call out redevelopment at any point. It puts it all in there. You can probably just reference the regulations, or there's no need for that paragraph.
Yeah, I didn't know,
There might not be any need for that paragraph at all.
That's what I'm thinking, because we're essentially.
It's
I
just
don't know that
being
we necessarily
redundant
need it,
because
but-
we're not really adding any provisions anyway for the riverfront.
just
Yeah, I
resort
think
back to the state
everything-
standards. State standards are so
Very
complicated.
detailed. I think I might just omit that. Does the commission?
The Rivers Protection Act, 1058, right?
Yeah. Outlines everything you need to know.
It goes on for pages and pages and pages, and I don't know how we can make it any better.
I thought you were making it more complicated.
I think I would tend to agree. I think we could just
I
get rid
agree.
of it.
And then my last comment is just a recommendation. You are allowing replication for mitigation, replication of wetlands. A lot of towns have just forbidden that because I've never seen one work. Maybe on the really large-scale plans done by really big companies where they put new highways in and go back and restore acres and acres. And then I, as a consultant, people say, well, I'll just put another wetland over there. And I like to say, the town doesn't let you do that. It's just my own personal recommendation.
I would agree 100% with everything you just said there. And I've always thought that, because I 100% agree that replication is, at best, not good. It does not come anywhere close to actually replicating the actual services of a wetland. I think, certainly, I think because we've talked about this, and I think the one thing that we do need, I don't like it, but I'm willing to put it in only because at some point we have to, sorry.
The Band-Aid doesn't work.
We have to, at some point, have some way to say, okay, if there's a situation where we have a buildable upland area, but the only way to get to it is through the property, through the person's property is wetland, we have to be able to give them some sort of a way of doing that. And, I mean, otherwise, if we sit there and say, well, no, there's no mitigation or there's no replication allowed, you can't do it, you can't get there.
Can you build a bridge?
There's other
essentially
ways
doing
to
a
do it,
taking.
because what you happen is you destroy perfectly good upland to have a failed wetland. I mean, I've seen that. Because you remove trees
And I'm not arguing, I'm
So, I
not
mean-
arguing this, but at the same time, the Conservation Commission can't sit there and go into what essentially is a regulatory taking without compensation.
Yeah, you'd be almost better to set up some sort of fee.
Well, I
Bill
think,
you with.
and I think we've talked long and hard about this, is like, I think the regulations, when we develop the regulations as it specifically relates to replication, are going to be very, very specific and very, very limited as to what, so in other words, I don't think we're intending to ever see something like, okay, well, you can take 10 acres of salt marsh and fill it in, because you certainly can't do that for a variety of reasons. But it would be something more like, a very limited amount of wetland that could be filled in order to create this replicated wetland to allow for for something like this where you're looking into access. But I think it's going to have to be very, very tightly regulated, and when we do those regulations, I think we're going to have to be very, very specific as to what is allowed and how much is allowed, and it's going to be small.
I can't recommend enough, instead of ruining perfectly good upland and habitat, to enhance the buffer zone habitat as best you can versus trying to create something that's just failed from the beginning. That's all I had to say, thank you.
You're preaching to the choir, I agree 100% with you, I'm also trying to figure out a way to not put the Conservation Commission specifically in the town in general in jeopardy, in some sort of legal jeopardy. That's the only reason why I'd be entertaining it.
So 6 or 7, it was a little ambiguous in the 7th one, other towns on the Cape prohibit wetlands replication. So that means the majority do allow it, but
I think all for the same reason.
yeah. If so, basically, we don't allow it now. You want to allow it to protect the town from litigation in the event of a regulatory taking. But we've had some parcels that are undevelopable.
Yeah, I know of at least 2 in town that are quite vulnerable to it, so.
But you can condition other things more productively. You don't have to allow replication. You can put conditions on for mitigation that aren't replication that will be better for the environment than trying to do replication. But
But how
we
are
don't
they,
have to take it.
well, that's my question though, but if you have an isolated upland and the only way to get to it for them is to cross a wetland, how do you go about doing that then?
Well, you just chalk up the loss of wetland and do something better right adjacent to the wetland. If that
I
were
think
my
that-
project, I would propose that. I would never propose replication. I would propose creating better habitat by planting or whatever I could do.
I think that's certainly something we could think of as certainly in terms of when it comes time to do the regulations for it, that be a very strong component of the regulation. I think that makes sense. So I'd be willing to consider that as part of the regulation.
People listening might be real angry at me, but that's just what I think.
I think it would have to only be allowed under a last resort scenario,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't be allowed in any other time.
And I think that's the first thing we're going to say in the regulation.
Yeah,
Is-
and
is essentially
the size
make
would be
that
very
statement.
small, the allowable size.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your efforts.
Okay,
Thanks,
Thank
Lynn.
you, Lynn. You made some excellent suggestions, I think.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Back to section 143-1, the purpose.
In Lynn's letter, or You're just talking about the section in general.
Yeah, I believe I heard you say that the only vernal pools in town exist on town property.
The only certified vernal pools thus
Certified
far
vernal pools.
have been certified by me, and yes, they are all on town property. Me and Catherine. Catherine and I.
So conservation land and wellhead protection and those types of areas.
Yes, conservation land mostly.
Just want to be sure about that, because those obviously would never be developed, but just,
Yeah, so getting the word out about vernal pool certification was part of the purpose of that activity.
But we would certainly welcome private property owners who would like to certify vernal pools.
indeed. Thank you.
We'll be starting at your property first. All right, would you like to make any comments, sir? You've been sitting there patiently.
Well, I was here for my certificate of compliance on 12 and 16 Highland Street,
Oh, you're all good.
which I'm proud to note that you used a picture of my house as an example of good coastal planning on your website.
Oh, did we?
There you go.
But I had a question related to this,
Oops, sorry.
which has to do with, is the purpose of this new bylaw to further restrict development within this broader jurisdiction area, the coastal area? So one question, the other question I had was,
I don't think restrict.
what kind of elevation determines a velocity zone?
What's the elevation of the velocity zone?
Yeah, in a flood zone, you know, what's the difference between a flood zone and a velocity zone in terms of elevation?
The elevation can vary.
Yeah, that varies, but it's wave height. So
Yeah.
the velocity zone is defined partly as the wave heights of greater than 3 feet. The coastal A zone is wave heights 1.5 to 3, right, 1.5 to 3 feet. And then or X is less than the 1.5 foot. So it's a combination of elevation and wave height, but it depends on, obviously, the elevation is going to vary depending on exposure.
You would presume in a flat area that the velocity zone and the flood zone, the A flood zone would be the same, right?
No,
It depends on the waves.
could be,
Yeah.
but not always. You can't just say, you can't make the blanket statement that they're both the same. But they could be, just to confuse it a little bit more.
And these are already defined areas available on the FEMA maps. They do designate which area of the flood zone you're in on all of the online maps. It should show you if you're in the V zone or the A zone.
The FEMA maps aren't always correct. You know, they're
They should be.
generalized and oftentimes people will change it. I mean, I've had to change it on my own properties with the elevations. You know, we get a local variance.
Mm-hmm.
Because elevations do change when people change
The grades, yeah.
properties. So the FEMA maps aren't always correct, but it's important for them to be correct because people make decisions based on what's on the map, right?
Right.
It's true.
And as you've said, the homeowner can appeal to FEMA to change, because, I mean, obviously, sometimes they make a mistake, and if you can file an appeal to FEMA, FEMA will review it, and if they find it makes sense, they will adjust the FEMA or the flood map accordingly.
And sea level rise is the variable that will always change. So that's the moving target we have to deal with.
So the intent of this bylaw is actually to help homeowners in those areas, if they are redeveloping or putting in new development, if it's allowed, to ensure that what they're building would stay around longer than a predicted storm event. So with the regulations, there would be a minimum elevation in hopes that during a storm event, giving floodwaters at that elevation, the structure would not be compromised. So we're trying to help homeowners preserve from loss of life, degradation of wetland resources, and their own assets, their houses.
No, I get that, but it's complicated.
Definitely is complicated, very complicated. And just in the town of Yarmouth, there's only 35 dwellings currently in the velocity zone. We would be looking to prohibit new development in the velocity zone because it is repetitive loss areas where there's no reason for there to be new development. When we have, you can experience significant loss. Debris can damage other resources and people. So that's what we would be looking to do in the regulations. Where the land area is experiencing wave heights of 3 or more feet,
More than 3 feet.
which is a very small portion of Yarmouth to begin with.
Probably down where I live.
I don't know, 3 feet, we could check.
Because that's the estuary that comes out from behind the hospital, from the Cranberry Bog into Lewis Bay.
Right.
The ferries go by.
That would hit it.
And it's very low lying. I mean, even in a nor'easter, that whole estuary fills up.
Just to the east of there, I'm sure it does. I know it will be, but.
So you'd have to believe that, the low-lying areas there, that like I said, in a nor'easter, a reasonable tide, not even a high tide, that whole area will just fill up with water. So you'd have to believe that in
It's all crab
a
creek.
storm, like a hurricane or something like that, you'd be in the velocity zone.
Yeah.
What are you checking?
You're not listed as in the velocity zone according,
We're high there, though. Highland Street is high on the front end of it, because it's like 20 feet elevation.
Oh.
It's on the backside of it.
actually, yeah, it is. You are in the velocity zone. But you already have development, so the regulations for redevelopment would be less stringent than for new development.
Well, we have an opening for the commission if you would like to
Yeah.
come and help us out, if you understand a lot of this stuff.
We are looking,
I was on the sewer commission for a long time. That was a frustrating experience.
This is never frustrating at all. It's a piece of
love it
cake.
here.
nothing but happy times all the time. We actually pay the town to serve on this board. It's that
Right.
much fun. It just,
Well, it's important work. I commend you for doing it.
all right, is there any other, thank you for your comments. Is there anything from the board? Anybody else have any questions specific to the bylaw, additions, subtractions, reconsiderations, hopes, fears, doubts? No? Okay, so first, I would like to acknowledge, I know Kelly Grant started this out a long time ago, and she started working on it, and she left, and Brittany came in and did a large compliance share of this whole review and update, and so I'd like to thank Brittany especially for her hard work, so thank you.
And thanks to Kelly, too. She did a lot of prep work.
Kelly, who?
Kelly who?
Is there anybody nobody else in the audience, is there anybody on Zoom who had any comments or questions on this? I don't think so, right?
See no raised hands.
All right, so I will close the public hearing on this. Do we need, is there any further discussion? If not, would somebody like to make a motion to recommend the bylaw for inclusion at actually, we're presenting to the to the Board of Selectmen first, and then onto the town meeting, special town meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. I thank you, everybody, for coming in and reviewing this. Thank you to those who wrote in, and thank you to Lynn for coming in as well.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay.
All right, next order of business then is approval of the meeting minutes for September 7th. David? Anything Anybody else read the minutes for September 7th?
I did not.
I will, no? I will be tabling that then to, what's our next meeting? October
5th. October 5th.
October 5th? All right, so I will table this to October 5th. Is there any other business that not reasonably anticipated?
I have a very quick announcement. Yarmouth Conservation is participating in the Coastal Zone Management Coast Sweep this year. It's a beach cleanup. Our beach cleanup will be on October 21st. We'll be meeting at Smuggler's Beach at 9 a.m. Posters will be posted next week, and it'll be all on social media and the website for more information if you'd like to join the beach cleanup.
Very good. Anybody else? I will point out for those who are still hanging around and don't have enough conservation already, we are looking for to fill an open position right now. So if you have any interest in serving on the Conservation Commission, go to Town Hall, contact the town manager's office, right, for the talent bank. Is that
Yeah,
who we
it's
go?
also online.
You can get the talent bank form online and submit it to the town manager's office.
One quick question.
Yes.
Brittany, is anyone considering attending the MACC conference that's coming up in a few months?
What is the date of that?
October 20. Is that the day?
October 21st, yes.
That would be a no. No, I always forget that they do that on a Saturday, and I will probably rarely attend that. But are you interested in attending? Because I can
interested.
sign you up.
Yeah, I'm interested. We can talk more about that.
Okay, I will send out that information.
It's really good.
It's usually in Devon's.
Yeah, Fort Devens.
Evans. Used to be at Holy Cross.
I never attend the fall. Only do the February one.
Maybe I'll change, do that.
I'll send the information either way.
Thank
I
you.
must have missed that email.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Now, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned at 6:44.